How's it going, everybody? This is Ask Me Anything About Politics. So, if you got any questions about politics, let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you don't know too much about it. It can be like trying to learn a new language. So, that is what I'm here for. I'm here to answer all of your questions about politics. This is a safe space where no one's going to make fun of you or roast you or debate you or yell at you or anything like that. This is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you don't know too much about it. I know that it can be confusing because we just refer to people by their last names sometimes, and we're referring to three-letter agencies and throwing out words like filibuster and, continuing resolution and reconciliation. And if you don't know what these words means, it can be really difficult to be part of the conversation about what's going on in our government. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. So, you know, this is the place where you can ask all of your questions about what's real and what's not real, and who can you trust and what's accurate, and what do the different parties stand for and stuff like that, and how do we fight back? If you're somebody on the right and you're like, I've always wanted to know why people on the left are like this. This is the time and place where you can ask that question, and no one's going to yell at you. No one's going to debate you. This is not one of those shows where I call having different opinions about me politically. Facky Party says, "How do you feel about LA currently?" I'm worried. I'm worried about the fact that Donald Trump is escalating things by sending in the National Guard and the military. These are peaceful protesters, 99% peaceful protesters, and it is part of his agenda to try to create as much chaos and Fox News footage of people burning cars and shit like that. So I'm against any sort of violence or anything. Facky Party says, but all I've seen is fire and riots. Facky, I think that you need to get your news from other sources then, because most of the protests have been, you're probably seeing footage that is specifically tailored to give you that impression. But yeah, there was no violence before the National Guard showed up. And there wouldn't be violence if ICE was obeying the law. What they're doing currently with their deportations. Four backups says burning one car. I mean, there's been a couple of cars burned as far as I can tell, but also it's a protest. Like nobody's accountable. Nobody's ordering people to burn cars. Sometimes people just go to protest because they want to light shit on fire. Indy says, dude, you have to be watching the same thing we are. It's violent and not peaceful. Indy, do you think it's possible that you're seeing misinformation and not me? Because there's a very clear narrative about what is going on. There's also a very clear narrative about what the right is trying to convince people of. According to Fox News and according to Donald Trump and according to all the conservative pundits out there, this is just leftists being violent and rioting and destroying property, and that's just not what's happening. It's inaccurate. So if you want to get into a real discussion about what's going on in Los Angeles, I'm down for that. But if you just want to yell at me and tell me that I'm lying and stuff like that, then I'll boot you. Fecky Party says, then your source of news isn't showing the whole scene of what's going on. Fecky Party, why are you so confident that what you're seeing is accurate and what I'm seeing isn't? How do you know I don't live in Los Angeles and I'm not currently walking the peaceful streets and participating in peaceful protests? Vegan Bitches says it's the cops and ICE starting the violence. Speaking from California, that tracks with everything I've read. It's Tro says, why aren't the people getting deported have the right to due process? Because ICE is taking it away from them illegally and unconstitutionally. Fecky Party says, shouldn't you want the whole picture? I do get the whole picture, but part of that whole picture is recognizing like which narratives are going to be pushed by right-wing agitators and right-wing talking heads versus what's actually going on. They have done studies on this, and right-wing media is only 17% accurate. So I think it's fair to say that any news that you get from those sources is not going to be reliable. Let's see here, because we can't say it's a peaceful protest when it's not. But what if 99% of the protests are peaceful, and the 1% that's not is all the footage that you're seeing? Facky, have you considered that possibility? Proud to be an American says everything it doing is constitutional. The Supreme Court has said as much. Just because the Supreme Court says it's constitutional does not mean that it's constitutional. Lily, and also they didn't say that, by the way. That is inaccurate. Let's see here. Left wing is the problem, boy. So that's an example of the kind of comment that gets you blocked. I don't care if you have different opinions than me, but actually ask a question, be part of the conversation. What's up, Tyro? I see you over there on YouTube. Good for you to be here. Facky Party says, "What's the odds? It's 1% though." I mean, the odds are 100% because that is what all of the data is suggesting. So open your heart to the idea that you are only seeing the 1% that is violent. Because if I'm seeing the 99% that's peaceful and the 1% that's violent, and you're only seeing the part that's violent, then it's you that's not getting the accurate picture, Facky. Cass says, "What side are you on?" I'm a Democrat, but I'm also on the side of a free and prosperous America for everybody. Jeremy says, "I speak for all Democrats when I say we're insane and need to be stopped. The right is right." All right, well, you're blocked, so congratulations. All right. D Grant says, "So logically, it would not be peaceful then. If 99% of it is peaceful and 1% is not peaceful, then it's still largely peaceful." The people on here who are just trying to spread the narrative that the riots in LA are like all violent and crazy and shit like that, like we see you. We see what you're trying to do. Let's be accurate, okay? Can we please acknowledge that? But if you're just gonna hammer this point over and over again, I'm going to block you because I'm here to engage with people, not to just fight. All right, Samurai Destroyer, good to see you again. DJ More Breaks, please. Good to see you as well. I'll get to your question in just a second. Lucy says, "Are politics fun?" I mean, they can be, but mostly politics is about taking care of people. Facky Party says, "So it was 1% when this happened in Ferguson a few years back with Black Lives Matter." It seems like you're changing the subject, Facky. Can we acknowledge that maybe you're not getting the whole picture? Why? It seems like you have an agenda to try to smear the left and try to smear these protests if you're diverting to just Black Lives Matter protests. Lucky says, "Videos don't lie. You have to be blind. FYI, violence is violence. Don't try to make it anything less." Lucky, ask a question or I'm going to boot you out of here. Chemia Silva says, "They didn't even care to look at my ID or anything." I'm not sure what you're referring to, Chemia, but I have an idea. Tommy says, "Why do you block people who have different opinions than you instead of trying to talk to them?" I do, but if you don't ask a question, then you're not here in good faith, so you're out of here. Cass says, "Did you see they took Greta? Trump's reaction was disgusting." Yeah, that's what Trump does. He reacts to things disgustingly. Christopher says, "Why are liberals so violent?" We're not. By and large, we are not. And the FBI has done studies on this, and there's way more right-wing violence than there is left-wing violence, Christopher. Ghostros1 says, "Why set the WeMore cars ablaze?" I don't know why people who are violent do violent things, but that is not what the majority of the protests were doing. So if somebody's setting Waymo cars on fire, go arrest them. I don't condone that, They do not represent me. Jody Calder says, "Rachel Maddow had a great segment last night. Did you see it?" I did not, Jody Calder. Globetrotter747 says, "Who would have won this hypothetical third-term race? 2000 Clinton versus Bush?" I'd probably give it to Clinton. Facky Party says, "Do you think they can come in legally and so they don't get deported?" So a lot of the people that ICE are deporting and detaining are U.S. citizens, veterans, people who have legal status to be here, people who have done no crimes whatsoever. So if your issue is just with people that come here illegally and people who have done crimes, then you should have an issue with 75% of the people that ICE are detaining and deporting. And in fact, Stephen Miller just yelled at ICE and said that they weren't deporting enough people. So they're going to be rounding up even more people that are legal citizens, legal residents, and people who have done no crimes, Facky. Let's see here. Chemi Silva says, "ICE broke my car's window, took me out with force. They didn't ask for an ID. They simply profiled me." I'm really sorry to hear that, Chemi. That's fucking disgusting. And I hope that that there is some legal course of action for you to take. Grumpy Cat says, what was Trump saying this morning about saving trees by cutting trees? I don't know. The dude says a bunch of crazy shit. Aiden Corley says, "Where are you getting that 75% figure?" I'm not... refresh my memory. What did I say was 75%? I forget. Oh, the number of people that that ICE is deporting that are not criminals or here legal residents. It's difficult to talk about those numbers because there's different blocks of people. So there's blocks of people that are here that are citizens. There's blocks of people that are legal residents and citizens. There's blocks of people that are legal residents and citizens and people with no criminal record. But then there's also like legal citizens who have a criminal record and stuff like that. And so I'm using kind of like an aggregate of all those numbers when I say 75%. So if you dig into the numbers, though, there's been wide reporting on this, that the majority of the people that ICE are deporting are not the illegal hardened criminals that they say that they are deporting. So, You got to do a little digging on that because I don't have the full breakdown of all those different demographics. Globetrotter says, would Ted Kennedy have won the presidency at some point if not for Chappaquiddick? Maybe. I'm not really down with all these political hypotheticals, by the way, Globetrotter. Thank you for being here, but there's kind of serious things to discuss, so let's try to get into that. If we actually, ignore me. You're being fun. I got no hate for you, my man. 77 says, do you think being a Republican is an inherently bad thing? Not if you're a Republican voter. If you're a Republican voter, I have nothing but empathy for you. Being a person being tricked into voting for Republican candidates is not a sin necessarily. If you're like a rich person or a racist person who votes for Republicans because you want to keep your money or you want to be racist, then yeah, you're a shitty person. But I think by and large, people are good and they just get tricked. They just get conned. And people on the left get conned also. Like 8 million voters got tricked into not voting in 2024. Christopher says, crossing the border without permission is a violation. They know this before they even cross. I don't know what you're talking about, Christopher, and ask a question or you will get booted. Eden says, so if they're holding citizens that have committed crimes, why aren't they doing it to white people? Because they're racist. Grumpy Cat says, can the military not follow Trump's orders? Yes, there is a mandate in the military that you do not have to follow illegal or unconstitutional orders. The issue is that Trump has been replacing people in the military from people who are there, career, nonpartisan people, with Trump loyalists who would just do whatever he says, regardless of how illegal or unconstitutional it is. So yeah, it's a real concern. It is a real fucking concern. 77 says, I think Kamala would have and should have won if she was a better leader. I think she was great. Jacob says, Trump is the GOAT. That's an example of the kind of comment that gets you blocked. I don't care if you have different opinions than me, but actually ask a question, be part of the conversation. Fecky Party says, see, I found that rude. What did I say that you found rude, Fecky Party? All right, going over to TikTok. Alrighty. I think everything that's going on in California right now is a ruse. I think it's to draw light off the fact that Donald Trump's in the Epstein files, and I thought that was the party that was for the protection of children. I think that it can have multiple, motivations. Like, I think Trump wants to escalate things with, Democratic-run cities and states. He wants excuses to declare martial law. He wants excuses to have the military on U.S. soil. And just like create more violence and chaos. Sam Register says, do you think college is a scam? College is not a scam, but there are issues with higher education, like the runaway costs, the fact that, there's legacy admissions. It's not really fair. It's not really a meritocracy. But yeah, on the whole, college, I think, is a good thing. Education is a good thing. DJ Morpley says Caucasians disproportionately commit more crime in the United States than any other race group. Why are we not talking about this? I regularly talk about the fact that immigrant communities commit crimes at lower rates than naturalized citizens. Mooly Dog says, have you ever heard of the bonus army? I don't know what that is. Fernandez says, this was all planned. That's why it started with kicking dangerous people first. And it's worse. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Fernanda. Keith the Fruit says, are we cooked is my question. We're not fully cooked, but if people do the work, then we can be not cooked. But if people like you and me don't do the work, if we just sit on our hands and hope for someone to come and save us, then we will be fully cooked. Let's see here. Austin Shoot says, would you say support for Israel is more backed by liberals or conservatives? I would say it's probably more backed by conservatives. The Democratic Party, and liberals and progressives are way more passionate about limiting how much we support Israel and there being consequences to the war crimes that the Netanyahu government has perpetrated. Grifter says, what can we do to make a difference during this time? There are a lot of things, Grifter. If you go to my Discord, I have got a thread posted with a bunch of suggestions, but short version, you got to talk to people in real life, make sure they're not believing propaganda, convince people to vote for Democrats, call your elected representatives, annoy them, hound them, go to their offices, strike, boycott, protest, and join groups that are already doing this work like Indivisible, Run for Something, and Vote Save America. Christopher says, what is your experience with immigration laws? Marginal. Sage says, like spread propaganda, LOL. I'm not spreading propaganda. Not sure what you're talking about. Gio Medina says, do you believe Dems and Republicans secretly work together to maintain power in government? No, I do not. There are wildly different outcomes in both cities, states, and the country based on who is in charge. The platforms are wildly different. The politicians are wildly different. So yeah, I don't truck with that. Both sides are the same. Both sides are working together narrative. Not even one tick. Kidscap says, how do we avoid martial law being declared in response to protests? That is a really good question, Kinscap, and I'm not 100% sure on the answer. My my gut reaction is just to make sure that whatever you're doing, it should be nonviolent. You should be putting pressure on your elected representatives to stand up to the Trump administration. We should be organizing people in mutual aid groups so that we can take care of each other in the event that Donald Trump tries to declare martial law and shit like that. We need to protect our right to vote. Yeah, we just need to do the work as citizens to make sure that we curb the excesses of the Trump administration and fight authoritarianism. Let's see here. National Guard shot veterans at DC protests in the 1920s. Yeah, and also at Tulane in the 60s, I believe. Grifter says, what are we supposed to do when peaceful protests stop working? Peaceful protests always work if we get 3.5% of the American population to contribute to it. So if we activate 3.5% of the American population, every protest movement that has been peaceful and has activated at least 3.5% of the population has succeeded. So, I'm not going to be, doom casting. Let's see here. GW says, hot take, Israel and Palestine are equally bad. I agree with that, but it's the governing bodies that are bad. The people that are living in those countries are, by and large, innocent. It is Hamas and the Netanyahu government that are bad. Peaches05 says, these protests in LA have been peaceful until the National Guard started attacking protester. That is accurate. Sunshine Wildflower says, Trump gearing up to declare martial law on June 14th, potentially. Let's see here. Jody Calder says, what do you think of Trump will do if his parade does not go well? I honestly, I don't think anything's going to happen. I think, there will be protests. He will potentially, have like people attacking the protesters. But I don't think that the military parade is going to come to anything. He's not going to be like upset that not enough people wooed for him or anything like that. Dean says, do you think California is in martial law? It is not. Let's see here. Gio Medina says, seems like neither cares about change, just staying rich and in power. So that does not bear out with the history of like what the various parties have accomplished. The Democratic Party is way better on that issue than the Republican Party. Things 100% do change when various parties are in power. When the Democrats are in power, workers and the 99% tend to do better. When Republicans are in power, the top 0.1% does better. That's just the way that it is. Dragon Soul, good to see you from Italy. Thank you for being here. Alrighty, scrolling down to the bottom of the TikTok comments. A Rios said, "Did you hear the chief? What the chief LAPD said?" Yeah, after the original protests before the National Guard was there, he commended the protests for being largely peaceful. William L says, "Say Democratic Party, please." Okay, Democratic Party. Globetrotter says, do you have any preferred candidates for 2028? I always punt on this question because I'm trying to get people focused on 2026. The midterm elections is the goal, guys. That is where we need to be focused. Let's see here. Grifter says, law enforcement literally shot rubber rounds at news reporters during the LA stuff. That is accurate. Adam Williams says, are right-wingers inherently bad people? No, they are not. So I have all of the empathy and sympathy in the world for voters. Maybe you're a right-wing voter who votes for Republicans because you're a racist, or you're a rich person who says, fuck the poor, I just want to get mine. You're a shitty person. But I think by and large, people are good. People that vote for the right, who are good people, they just got conned, they got tricked, and people on the left get conned and tricked as well. Now, people in the power structures of the Republican Party, meaning elected officials, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, people in the billionaire class who are spreading these propaganda narratives, talking heads on the right, like all those ding-dongs on Fox News, Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, all those guys, those people are bad people. They are bad people. All the right-leaning Supreme Court justices, those are bad people, and I have no empathy for them because they know exactly what they're fucking doing, and they're hurting a lot of people. They're doing it on purpose. Christopher says, lots of people fall into false information and end up voting the wrong way. That is accurate. Mr. Fax says, is it time for a new party? Because both of these parties failed the people. So, Mr. Fax, that is inaccurate. The Democratic Party does better for the people than the Republican Party does. And yes, they're not perfect. But having a third party until we have ranked choice voting is only going to serve to be spoiler candidates for whatever party that you like better than the other party. And the Republican Party is hostile to the idea of ranked choice voting. They actually have a House resolution to make ranked choice voting illegal. You can Google it. It's called House Resolution 3040. Republicans trying to ban ranked choice voting. So give that a Google. Mickey Pifani says ranked choice voting is just meant to confuse people. No, it's meant to give people more options. Sunshine Wildflower says, get big money out of politics. I agree. And it's a Democratic platform that's about that. The Republican platform is to put more money into politics and make bribery and corruption more acceptable and illegal. Danny is terrible says, thoughts on Jill Stein? There is a lot of evidence to suggest that she is an agent of the Russian government. Homeslice says, that's why we pay higher prices and more taxed when Dems have majority. That is inaccurate. Aiden says, do you think the left is trying to scare us that people voted Trump, or do we have a reason to be? Do I think the left is trying to scare us people that voted for Trump? No, I don't think the left is trying to scare people that voted for Trump. I think people on the left are trying to reach out to the people that voted for Trump and get them to recognize that him and the Republican Party and the billionaire class are their enemy. Those are the ones that are ruining your fucking lives, not us. We're trying to help you guys. Riley says, is the two-party system cooked? I don't love the two-party system, but I think that people blame it for a lot of problems that are actually the fault of the Republican Party. Let's see here. Someone with no screen name says, is the LA protest really violent, or is it because of the media? It is because of the media. 99% of the protests have been peaceful. If there are people out there burning cars and destroying buildings, arrest those people. I don't give a shit. Those don't represent the protest movement. If you are a protest movement that anybody can participate in, it goes, it only makes logical sense that some of those people would be bad faith actors who just want to go somewhere and burn a car on fire, like just light a car on fire. So yeah, you can't judge a protest movement just by the violent portions of it, Mark Allen says, you're lying. No, I'm not. And I don't care for being called a liar, so you're out of here. Ask a question or you'll get booted, everybody. Tate says, have you seen the ICE? It is sad. Yeah, I have seen what ICE is doing. Ella says, how long do you think it will take to fix this mess if Democrats win 2028? It just depends on how many Democrats we get in the Senate and in the House. We have the ability to elect the exact kind of Democrats, the exact kind of politicians who can and want to and will fix this. It just depends on whether America will, and whether Americans like you and me will do the work of convincing people to vote for better politicians, because people are plugged into these propaganda machines 24/7, and they're just being convinced that the Republican Party is better than it actually is, and the Democratic Party is worse than it actually is. Scrolling down to the bottom, says, are you down for Kamala Part 2? She can do whatever she wants, Danny is terrible. Who are you hoping to run in 28? I always punt on this question because I'm trying to keep everybody focused on 26. The midterm elections is where we need to be focused. That is where we need to put all of our time and attention, because Democrats need to run the House in 2026 so that we can be a check on the Trump administration's power. All right, Dragon Sauce. So right now, has a situation in Los Angeles. Here they make it seem like a tragedy is occurring. I mean, I don't think it's a nice situation. From outside, I'm struggling to make a clear picture of the situation. So Dragon Soul, what's going on in Los Angeles is this. There are peaceful protests happening in response to immigration enforcement in America operating like a rogue agency, wildly unconstitutional, illegally snatching people off the streets who have done nothing wrong, legal residents, citizens, veterans. Some of them they're detaining for unknown numbers of days without identifying themselves, without giving them a chance to talk to their lawyers. Some of them they are deporting to concentration camps in other countries like El Salvador, South Sudan, and Libya. Now, the protests were peaceful. The LAPD came out and said, we thank the protesters for being so peaceful. Donald Trump didn't like that, so he said, oh my God, the protests are terrible. I'm going to send the National Guard. The National Guard came, and then the protests escalated into, some of them were violent, but most of it was not violent still. And now Trump is continuing to escalate by sending in the Marines and shit like that. So he is trying to make more violence happen. And 99% of the protests continue to be peaceful, and the news just keeps on showing people the 1% that is not peaceful. But thank you for your question, Dragon Sauce. The True Ender King says, I'm seeing so much crud about what Trump is doing. How do I process this rage from the fact that people actually voted for this? So the True Ender King, I think it's important to recognize that people have been being lied to for a very long time. And a lot of money and a lot of energy is going into lying to people about what the government is, about what the parties represent, about what gets done under the various political parties. It is a massive web of bullshit that has been propped up by the billionaire class in order to get people to distrust the government, distrust our institutions, not know what's true, and either vote for Republicans or just not vote at all. So I have a lot of sympathy for anybody who got tricked into voting for this, the same way that I have a lot of sympathy for people that got tricked into not voting at all. But if people like me and you do the work, we can undo all this damage. We don't have to live like this. We can have a better government. And I would encourage you to go to my Discord, because I have a thread posted with a bunch of good things that people can do to be part of the solution to this problem. But yeah, self-help is self-care is important also. So, take your days off, go to the movies, enjoy your life, have joy, but also have a hope, because they want you to believe that everything is futile, that resistance is futile. And so have your hope, do the fucking work. And when they say, don't bother fighting us, it's game over, I want you to tell them back, suck my butthole, you weird ass fucking dork. All right, DG1790 says more military needed. That is an example of the kind of comment that gets you blocked, DG. So ask a question or you're going to get out of here. Viewer 2024 says, is LA a distraction? It's partially a distraction, but it's also partially the Trump administration trying to escalate things. They want there to be chaos and violence so that they have an excuse to deploy the military on American soil, which will further escalate things, and then Trump can declare martial law, cancel all elections, and declare himself Lord King of America until he dies. Grifter says, do you think things can change or get better during the midterm? Absolutely. If people do the work, Grifter. If people don't do the work, then we're fucked. But if people do the work, we're going to be okay. Midwest Prodigy says, have you seen Rockland County election interference? I have, and I am waiting to see how that turns out, because, regardless of what happens, regardless of what evidence they find, it is extremely unlikely that we will be able to just sort of install Kamala Harris as president going forward. But it is important that we get that information to make sure that our elections are free and fair going forward. Preston says, bruh, they were throwing rocks at police cars before the guard showed up. So Preston, that is inaccurate. The LAPD came out and said that they were thankful that all the protests were peaceful going forward. So I would just recommend that you get your news from other sources, because you're clearly not getting the accurate picture. Falling Box says most Trump supporters won't let that happen. Let's not, say that Trump supporters are all one thing, the same way that we don't like it when people on the right say that all, left-wing voters are all one thing. Viewer 2024 says, thank you for calmly discussing politics. You're welcome, Viewer 2024. Thank you for being here. Dragon Soul says, so basically he's acting like a dictator. 100%. He is mirroring other dictatorships and authoritarian movements in the past. He's doing the exact same shit that Vladimir Putin did, that Orban did, that fucking, Hitler did, during the Nazi party shit, It's all classic fucking fascist Hitler shit, that's going on here. It's not new or interesting or innovative. My friend made fun of me for saying it pretentious like that, which I do for fun, not because I think that's how you really pronounce it. Let's see here. Fireboy69 says, do you think we can survive another 4 years of economic and political mismanagement that we have seen since the beginning of the war on terror? We can survive, but the problem is it's going to take a lot of people doing a lot of work. But the more people that do the work, the less work that we all have to do. So be part of the movement, guys. Join me. Go to my Discord, look at the list of shit that I say that everybody's got to do, and do a little bit of it. Do as much as you can. If you only got 2 limbs, one arm, one leg, whatever combination. If you're a single parent with 5 kids you're trying to take care of, obviously you're not going to be canvassing 24/7, talking to voters, doing all the work. But just do a little bit. Do what you can. And if you're an 18-year-old with no fucking responsibilities, and you got a lot of gas in the tank, fucking let's hit the ground running together, man. Let's do the work. A Rio says, how much money do you make from this? I make like $40 a month from my Patreon, which is not a ton, obviously, but people want to support me for spreading this positive message and trying to organize people, then you can support me, but you don't have to. I'm not out here begging for money. Let's see here. The True Ender King says, my prior question has been answered. Excellent. Oh, I'm so glad I was able to do that for you. Geo Floyd Overdose says, why wouldn't you want to help ICE enforce our laws? Geo Floyd, so the reason why is because ICE is acting illegally and unconstitutionally. They are behaving like a rogue agency who laws do not abide, they don't have to abide by the actual laws. They are acting exactly like the Gestapo during World War II, during the fucking Nazi reign of Germany. And if you want more information on that, I would recommend you check out Chris Murphy during a Senate hearing was grilling Kristi Noem about this, and he gave a great speech at the beginning. And I just go check that out because he outlines in great detail all of the various ways that ICE is acting illegally, unconstitutionally, and immorally. Let's see here. Mimi007 says $40 a month. That's it. I mean, that's what I get for my Patreon. You know, I exist. This stream makes me exactly as much money as people decide to give me. You know, I'm not getting paid by anybody to do this. I just believe in the work. But I'm also a professional stand-up comedian. That's where the majority of my income comes from. A. Rios says, what would solve this? Can you be more specific, A. Rios? Let's see here. Is Trump blowing things way out of proportion in order to declare martial law? Yes. He wants to declare martial law so that he can have a country that is more like Russia, that is more like Nazi Germany, that is more like Turkey and, you know, Syria before, before Assad got deposed. Yeah, he wants there to be no rules for him and for his buddies, for them to have all the money and all the wealth and fuck everybody else. He wants to be able to go out there and, you know, do whatever he wants and fucking grab him by the pussy and have people murdered and have there be no consequences for him and his buddies. And if he doesn't like you, then he should be able to steal your company and kick you into a river or deport you or send you to a fucking concentration camp in El Salvador. That's what he wants. That's what him and his whole fucking team want. Mr. Brownie says, you really believe that? I do, because he said as much, you know, not in those exact words, but I can look at what he's doing and infer based on that, you know, M. Brownie. And if you don't see that, if you don't recognize that that is his goal, his ultimate goal, to become God, King, Emperor of America and be able to do whatever the fuck he wants and steal our money and fuck us all over, I would recommend you get your news from a different source, because it's obvious to people like me who follow the news that that's what's going on. Grifter says, thoughts on the Trump-Elon breakup? I think it's fun to watch, but I don't think there's any substance behind it. Dragon Soul says, could you please explain what ICE is? It certainly won't be solidified water, LMAO. Yeah, ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. There's Border Patrol, which makes sure that people don't cross the border illegally. But if somebody is here illegally and they don't live in a border town, ICE is the agency that goes out and grabs them. But they were created after 9/11 to work in, you know, conjunction with national security, and they have done nothing but operate like a rogue agency ever since. And the Obama administration tried to rein them in. They told him, suck our dicks, and, you know, he was never able to actually do anything about them. But they are 100% a rogue agency that is acting illegally, unconstitutionally, immorally, and they 100% should be disbanded. Grifter says, what's your thoughts on him removing the Constitution from the webpage? It's part of the information war that is part of every authoritarian movement. You know, they're trying to burn books so that we don't have accurate information. They're trying to change history. They are trying to make their lies into the truth. Let's see here. M. Brownie says, yikes, you are lost. And you are blocked, M. Brownie, because you're not asking questions. I don't care if you have different opinions than me, but actually ask a question, be part of the conversation. All right, Geo Floyd Overdose says he's already a billionaire. Why would he want more money? Because billionaires are sick, man. They're disgusting people. They have greed sickness where nothing is enough, you know? Like, there's no billionaire, well, I say no billionaire, but there's like over 1,000 billionaires in this country, and almost all of them are just like, give me more, give me more, give me more. Read the book Dark Money if you want to know what billionaires are actually like. Because billionaires aren't these like good-natured people who are like, oh my God, I'm so happy that I'm creating jobs for everybody. And oh boy, I didn't realize that my factory was giving people cancer. All right, geez, man. Oh man, that sucks. I'd love to stop it, but then I would have to fire all these people. You know, that is not what billionaires are. Billionaires are, we don't want to clean up our factory because that would mean that I can't afford another fucking mega yacht. So I'm going to give all your kids cancer so I could be a little bit richer. Because fuck you guys. I don't give a shit. Read Dark Money by Jane Mayer and treat everybody who's watching this to read Dark Money by Jane Mayer. If you really want to know how the billionaire class has been waging a silent war against us for a generation. And we are suffering. The reason why we are living like this right now, where everybody's fucking struggling and nobody knows what's fucking real anymore, is because of billionaires and because of a conspiracy that they have been behind for decades. All right, scrolling down the bottom. Matt Piffer says, why do you state all your saying off of opinion based on your biased inferences? You can infer. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Can you clean up your sentences, please? Let's see here. Loopy Loo says, I am reading it right now, terrifying that it was going on for so long. Yeah, terrifying and infuriating, Loopy Loo. I am fucking right there with you. Geo Floyd Overdose says Trump spent over 1/3 of his net worth to fund his presidential campaign. Yeah, because he recognized that he could become richer. You know, like, do you know Geo Floyd? Just you seem to be like you're here in good faith, so I'm going to engage with you in good faith. But recognize that my patience for that is limited. So you got to meet me halfway sometimes. You realize that Trump, just in the couple of months that he's been president this year, has become like $4 billion richer because he's accepting donations in the form of people buying his meme coins, dark money donations from bribes, I should call them, from foreign nationals, which is expressly illegal and unconstitutional. The $400 million plane that he got from Qatar, like, he is stealing our money. He is taking money out of Americans' pockets and putting it into his pocket and the pocket of his billionaire buddies. And if you want me to go into more details there, I can, but that's just like a general brush. The fact that he has a meme coin, that he has a Bitcoin or whatever you want to call it, is one of the most unbelievably corrupt vehicles for bribery and corruption that any president in probably American history has ever done. So yeah, engage with me on this, my man, because this idea that you have of him as being like this altruistic billionaire who just wants people to have better lives, it is wildly inaccurate. And I'm not saying that you're a bad person for thinking that. I just think that you got your news from the wrong sources. Let's see here. Scrolling down to the bottom of the TikTok comments. Forging Pro Gamer says, what happens to Marines that refuse to go to LA? People in the military have the right to refuse illegal or unconstitutional orders. That being said, the people that are in charge of the military right now, they're Trump people. And so I worry about them, like they could potentially be dishonorably discharged for not doing things like that. Let's see here. Cole Duncan says, yeah, bro, the president with a meme coin is so bad, dude. Definitely. Seems like you're being sarcastic, Cole Duncan, but what you're saying is accurate. Like, a president with a meme coin is, because it means that he can get unlimited amounts of dark money donations from people that we're never going to be able to figure out who that is. It is a tool of unbelievable corruption and bribery. Let's see here. Cole Duncan says, no, they don't. They took an oath. But you don't know. You're saying things that are inaccurate, but man. George Floyd Overdose says, I'll still take the corrupt guy that supports U.S. ideals over the corrupt guy that does everything to go against U.S. ideals. What choice did we have? There was no corrupt guy that does everything to go against U.S. ideals. Geo Floyd Overdosed. Again, I think that you're getting inaccurate information. Because Donald Trump was the worst choice in that election and in the 2016 election. So yeah, if you want to engage with me in good faith, please continue. But I gotta tell you, you're on thin ice, my man. It does not seem like you were here. You're hearing the things that I'm telling you, my man. It seems like you're just trying to push a narrative. Dragon Soul says, BTS, props to you for talking about politics without fearing others' reactions. Hey, this is, if we don't yell now, we're gonna have to whisper tomorrow. Let's see here. Colin B says, I love what Trump is doing. That's an example of the kind of comment that gets you blocked. I don't care if you have different opinions than me, but actually ask a question, be part of the conversation. Grifter says, recommendations for political topics to do research on. Grifter, go to my Discord. I got book recommendations. I got recommendations for volunteering. I got recommendations for podcasts. There's a lot of good stuff there. And if you tell me if you tell me something that you are passionate about, I can tell you like other things to do some research on. Susie says, if Trump declares martial law, would civil war be our only recourse? I do not believe so, Susie. I do not think that violence kind of just begets violence. I don't think that's the smart move. But all the research that I have done into this says that we only win if we are nonviolent. And so I'm just going to encourage people to continue to be nonviolent and continue to recruit other people to be a part of this nonviolent struggle. Jesse Lee Peterson says, what is wrong with National Socialism minus the racism? Well, I mean, I would ask you to define your terms then, because the National Socialist Party is the name of the Nazi Party. So if you remove the racism, then what are we talking about? Drew P. Balls says, someone who says military members can refuse unlawful orders doesn't know what they're saying. I mean, that's the truth. Drew P. Balls, it is. I don't know what you want me to tell you, man. Like, just give it a Google. Danny is Terrible says, how do the protesters stay peaceful in the face of violence? It's hard, and you are putting your body at risk. All the people that marched in Selma, they were beaten, they were sprayed with hoses, but they won because they remained nonviolent. And the reason why we have civil rights today for African Americans is because those people made that sacrifice. And not everybody wants to make that sacrifice. Not everybody is, able to commit in that way. But if you can, if you should, and just because you're part of a protest does not mean that you're going to get your head beaten in or dragged off by ICE or hit with a fucking fire hose. But there is a chance, because we are dealing with a lawless and immoral presidential administration and immigration enforcement that will do those things because they believe this is the way that they achieve more power and steal more from us. The way that we fight is by being nonviolent. When they interview people who were in the military in authoritarian governments that lost, and they ask the people in the military, like, your dictator ordered you to fire on those people. Why didn't you? They say, I thought I saw my kid in there. I thought I saw my neighbor in there. I thought I saw my wife in there. So if we do that, if we collect all the people, and if all the people are nonviolent, then we'll win. That's just the way that it goes. That's the way that it's always gone throughout history. Matt says, good faith question. Do you think Kamala Harris would actually be able to lead a country? Yeah, she seems like a very capable and smart person. Danny's Terrible says, do you think there will ever be consequences for these unlawful acts? If Democrats get back in charge, then yes. But if not, and if we don't do the work to get Democrats in charge, then no. Jody Calder says, when is the Senate supposed to vote on the big bill? I'm not 100% sure about that. I don't believe that there's a deadline. I believe they can just continue working on it and tweaking it for, the rest of the fucking time if they want. Herb says, is there anything Congress can do if he declares martial law? I believe that they do have the power to undo that. I'm not sure how many votes they would need, if they would need like a 2/3 majority, like a veto-proof majority. But they 100% do have the power to do that. Now, the issue is that because Congress is mostly Republicans, they are incentivized to not do that, and they don't really have any kind of like moral backbone, elected Republicans. They will either go along with Trump because they like the fact that he's doing dictator shit, or they're scared of him. They're scared of his, his base doing violence against them. He's scared about the billionaires primarying them and them losing their jobs. Grifter says, is it a high chance we're going to go into martial law? That I don't know. I would say that there's a high chance of it happening if people don't do the work. But if people do the work, then I don't think that it's going to happen. But yeah, Trump is going to try to do it. That is what his ultimate goal is to escalate the violence to the point where he can declare martial law. Let's see here. A Rios says, when will an independent step up? So A Rios, I don't really, I know you're here in good faith, so I'm not attacking you, but I don't really truck with this idea that both parties are garbage and you need to throw them out and start over, or that we need an independent party because both parties have been such abject failures. I have been watching this happen for a long time, where Democrats get dragged through the mud no matter what they do, and the zeitgeist largely ignores all of the really terrible things that the Republican Party does. Democrats never get any credit, Republicans never get any blame. I think that largely the idea that we have around the parties in our culture is inaccurate, and that the Democratic Party is better than people give it credit for, and the Republican Party is worse than people give it credit for. As such, the Democratic Party is the best option, so why not just support them? And as they get more political power, we can start replacing them with candidates that we like better. Like if you're a progressive and you want more younger, more progressive candidates and you want to vote out centrists, old-ass centrists like Nancy Pelosi, then you can do that. Like the mechanism is there. But in order for that to happen, you have to have a political party that gives a shit about having free and fair elections and letting people have the right to protest and not, fucking stealing elections or calling in the National Guard and escalating tensions and shit like that. Now, as far as like independent parties and third parties and shit like that, yeah, I don't have a problem with it necessarily. I just think that I don't love this sort of like blanket, both parties are terrible kind of rhetoric. And as far as like having room for third parties, again, your only option is to vote for the Democratic Party, because the Republican Party is hostile to the idea of other political parties unless they serve to be spoiler candidates for the Democratic Party. And they are working to make ranked choice voting illegal. You can look it up. They have a bill on this already. HR 3040. Republicans are trying to ban ranked choice voting. There you go. Give it a goog. Scott Clower says the current independent party is currently used to split the Democratic vote. That is accurate. All right. Grifter says, what would martial law entail for the U.S.? It would give the executive a lot more power to do things like deploy the military into American cities, to circumvent state sovereignty, so they could tell California what their laws have to be and stuff like that, potentially canceling elections. I'm kind of shooting from the hip here because I'm not 100%. I don't have like the full list ahead of me, but that's kind of like the general vibe of what martial law would be able to accomplish. But yeah, I'm not an expert in that, so I would say take that with a grain of salt and give it a Google to double check. All right, Dragon Soul. At least you have the guts to yell here in Italy. Political abstentionism is reigning, and trust in our democracy is now zero. But like sheep, we sit back and take it all. The incorrect decisions of our representative politicians. Fight while you can, because I hope that day never comes. The moment they find the opportunity to turn you all into sheep like they did to us, it's going to be over. That's a warning. Dragon Soul, I hear you, my man. But that is a tool of right-wing authoritarianism, is to convince people to do nothing. And so I hope, I'm Italian on my mom's side, and so my Italian brother or sister, whoever the fuck you are, I hope that you do the work in Italy to get your people activated and engaged in politics again. France, Italy, Europe, like I'm about how much power the working class here and how generally progressive the governments over there tend to be. So bring Italy back into the fold, man. Like get back your 2-hour fucking work days where you get to have a fucking nap afterwards and go to lunch and have a glass of wine, then you work for another 2 hours, then you have a cigarette and everything's groovy, baby. A. Rio says, but the Democratic Party wants to push these agendas I'm not in the same line with. What is an agenda item that the Democratic Party has, A. Rios, that you are against? What is an issue that you're very passionate about, A. Rios? Grister says, sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out. Oh, that's fine. I was kind of shooting from the hip anyways. It would basically just give the presidency even more authority to do things than they have right now. But I'm not an expert on it, so I would just say it's probably better to give that a Google than to hear what I'm saying about it. I'm 90% sure that my breakdown of that was accurate, but still, I got to put that disclaimer out there. User a bunch of numbers says, explain why I should vote for the party that is rioting and looting in LA. The Democratic Party is not rioting and looting in LA. That is the rioters and looters and people that are doing property destruction are not affiliated with any political party. We have no idea who those people are. If they are doing these crimes, then they should be arrested. But 99% of the protests that are happening in LA are peaceful, and it is a worthy and moral cause, what they are doing. If you want to engage on that, I will. But if you're just trying to spread a narrative that there's just fucking chaos and destruction and it's all being led by Nancy Pelosi out here in California, then I'm going to boot you, because that's not what I'm doing here. I'm here to engage with people. Let's see here. JD Hendry says, bah, ha, 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 ha. That's not a question. Knight Rider says, so I have a question. Is peaceful lighting cars on fire, destroying businesses, and assaulting law enforcement officers? No, that's not. But also that is not what 99% of the protesters are doing. Texas Ranger says, bro, have you seen them throwing rocks at ICE vehicles? I have seen videos of that. But again, that is not what 99% of the protesters are doing. And if people are doing that, go arrest them. I got no problem with you arresting those people. Tony Bologna says, have you noticed that MAGA are trying to condemn everyone while not acknowledging their shortcomings? Yeah, that's a tool of the right-wing propaganda, So my advice is just ignore it. Treat everybody who's spreading those narratives as Russian bots, because there's no value to engaging with them as real people. Tina Cake says, I'm really upset about Abrego Garcia. I feel like these charges are being added on purpose. Yeah, they're all trumped up in bullshit. And on Strict Scrutiny, which is a podcast where they talk about the law, they have said that there are already a bunch of red flags in the indictments that make it seem like it's all bullshit. And so I have faith that Abrego Garcia is going to be found not guilty. A. Rio says, why is a Democrat-run state paying more in gas than others? In Democratic states, we have, there's a lot of potential reasons for that. But one potential reason, I don't have the full breakdown of all the different things that gas costs go into in all the various states. But one example would be that in Democratic-run states, we are taking climate change very seriously. And so we increase taxes on gas in order to pay for things like solar power and wind power and hydroelectric and stuff like that, so that we can eventually have a totally renewable, free, clean energy grid. But yeah, that is my answer to that, A Rios. And you can like that or not like that, but that's the reason why. And I personally think that it's probably better to charge people more for gas so that we can incentivize people to have electric cars and take buses and trains and ride bikes and stuff like that. Max Savage says, I have a question. Well, ask it then. Let's see here. How's the federal government handling the homeless situation? Not well, Dragon Soul. JD Henry says, should they be protesting Congress instead of ICE, considering they are just enforcing the laws? So JD Henry, ICE is not enforcing the laws. ICE is acting unconstitutionally, illegally, immorally. They're behaving like a rogue agency. If you want more specifics about that, Senator Chris Murphy, during a hearing with Kristi Noem, had a speech where he detailed in great specificity all the ways that ICE is acting illegally and as a rogue agency. So I would say please check that out, because that is very accurate. Let's see here. Not So Slim Shady says, do you believe there are grounds for impeaching Trump? 100%, absolutely, without question. Mark Dobbins says, how do you know that you are an expert? I just know a lot about this stuff, man. I don't know what you want me to tell you. You Figured Out says, why does MAGA have a problem with LA protests but not in January 6th? So people that think that what happened on January 6th was fine, but what's going on in LA is not fine, are a victim of right-wing billionaire-funded propaganda. And so, I have a lot of empathy for those people. If you were born into that family, in that city, going to that church, looking at that Facebook feed, then you might think those things as well. So the solution to that is the same solution that I am preaching on here every fucking day, which is you got to talk to people in real life and pull them out of whatever propaganda holes they might be living in. Lauren, good to see you again. Tracy Bauman says, always have been reasons to impeach Trump. That is accurate. A. Rios says, thank you for answering my question. Thank you for being here, A. Rios. I'm always happy to engage with people who might not agree with me, but are at least here in good faith and not just going to call me a cucktard, But yeah, let's talk more, man. Tell me more about what you're passionate about, and I will happily explain why the Democratic Party is better on whatever issue that you care about than the Republican Party. Let's see here. Feather Arrow says, is it worth? Yes, it is worth. Max Savage says, my question is too long. All right, well, did you request to be a guest, Max Savage? Let's see here. All right, Max. Well, let me hear your question then, Max.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing all right. What you got, buddy?
So I've been going around TikTok asking everybody these questions on both sides of the aisle, but wealthy elitists brought children to an island and assaulted them, right?
I mean, so you're talking about Epstein, right?
Epstein.
Yeah, okay.
The Biden administration and the Trump administration knows who these people are, but they're not telling us.
Okay.
Why are we fighting amongst each other?
Excellent question, Max. I'm going to boot you so I can answer. Okay, man?
Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Okay, so Max, there is a ton of misinformation around Epstein. Depending on where you get your news, the Epstein flight logs are Bill Clinton and Kamala Harris and Bill Gates and not Trump and, right-wing people. And the answer is I don't know who knows what. I don't know what the FBI has. Even fucking Trump's people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are telling us that, like, hey, everything's already out there. There's no secret Epstein files, blah, blah, blah. So I would just encourage you to have the kind of attitude of, I don't know this information, and the people that are confident that this is all just Democrats or all Republicans versus no Democrats or no Republicans, those people are probably full of shit and they have an agenda. Now, as far as fighting amongst ourselves, I think it's really important to distinguish between fighting amongst voters and describing accurately the difference between the two political parties. Because I go hard against Republican politicians and Republican talking heads like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro and, Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson and all those fucking pieces of shit. But I don't go hard against Republican voters. Maybe some of them are pieces of shit who are like, I'm a rich person and I don't care about fucking over the poor, so I'm voting Republican so I can get my taxes cut. Or maybe some of them are racist people who are like, I don't give a shit if Trump shits on my face so long as he shits on a Mexican person's face harder. Those people are bad people, and I do think that we should call out those people when we see them. But as far as like Republican voters, I'm not here to throw any shade on those people whatsoever. And I think that you are 100% right in that sentiment that we should not be fighting amongst ourselves, but we do need to be clear-eyed about what is going on in our government. And what's going on is that the billionaire class is working with the Republican Party. And there is a ton of data to support this. And any narrative around Democrats being the party of the billionaire class and more billionaires support Democrats is all misinformation and propaganda. So yeah, let's work together. Let's all be part of the 99%. Let's all not fight amongst ourselves. But let's be realistic. Like, which is the party that cuts taxes for billionaires and cuts programs for the 99%, like Medicare and Medicaid? Which is the party that raises taxes on billionaires? The Democratic Party. Like, that's what they do. Which is the pro-union party? Which is the party that is antithetical to union rights? Whose NLRB was fighting for unions for the first time in generations? It was the Democrats. Whose head of the Federal Trade Commission was breaking up monopolies? It was the Democrats. So yeah, thank you for your question, Ben. I appreciate you being here. Alrighty, let's see here. Grifter says, do you think separation of church and state needs to be taken more seriously? 100% absolutely. Susie says, could Trump destroy the parts of the Epstein files that he is in? Potentially. I don't know how, like where the evidence is. I don't know who's in control of it. I mean, if Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino could just literally go in there and change all the records, they 100% would. These people have exactly zero integrity and zero, adherence to their oaths of office. Someone who has no screen name says, who do you think will be the 2028 presidential candidate for the Democrats? Whoever wins the primary. And also, I never wish cast for 2028. I'm trying to get everybody focused on 2026. Democrats got to run the table in 2026 so that we have somebody who is fighting against the Trump administration. The Republican Party is asleep at the fucking wheel while he is taking billions of dollars in bribes from foreign nationals and shipping people who have done nothing fucking wrong to concentration camps in other countries. It is a fucking nightmare, and the Republican Party is doing fucking nothing to stop it. The Trump administration is taking money out of the pockets of poor people and giving it to himself and rich people. And we need a political party. We need people in Congress to do their fucking job and stop him. And because Republicans are fully in power right now, it is their responsibility to do that. And Democrats are ready to work with them on that, but they're not willing to do that. So we got to replace them. We got to vote them out of existence. All right. LAT says, always remember that only 33% of the registered voters voted for Trump. That's how to defeat him. It's actually less than that, I think, LAT. The last number that I heard was 23%. Marky Mark says, go red. That is an example of the kind of comment that gets you booted. I don't care if you have different opinions than me, but actually ask a question, be part of the conversation. All right, scrolling down the bottom, says, do you think the 2024 election was fair? I used to, but all the stuff that's happening in the New York case around the voting machines, it's kind of raising my eyebrow a little bit. And so I'm waiting, I'm reserving judgment to see how all that shakes out. But I am the most skeptical about if Trump actually won the election now than I have been, since November 6th. All right. Fiery Boy 69 says, what would ya think about making a law to mandate the Speaker of the House may only serve for 1 month? I'm not really sure what the value of that would be, Fiery Boy 69, but educate me, my man. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think about it. Chris 10 says, now that the threat of Musk's primary money is no longer on the table, will Republicans help to impeach? Probably not. There are other factors that cause them to kowtow to Trump, but yeah, it was not just Musk's primary money that was scaring them. Christionas Kazavecki, good to see you again, says, what the hell is going on in LA? Is democracy dying in the US? So democracy is in danger. You in danger, girl, American democracy. But it is not dead yet. What's going on in LA is largely peaceful protests in response to a rogue immigration agency that has been kidnapping people and shipping them off to concentration camps in other countries. And the Trump administration is trying to escalate tensions with the protesters. So he is sending in the National Guard and he is sending in the Marines. And there have been some clashes. There has been some violent and some property destruction, but that is not what the protest is about. That is not what 99% of the protesters are doing. It is just a few bad faith actors, and those people should be arrested and thrown in jail. Catastrophic Blue says, not a chance in hell every swing state voted blue for Senate but red for president. Again, Catastrophic Blues, I am with you, but we got to wait and see what the data says. And if that's something that really concerns you, call your reps and ask them to be part of that investigation. Ask them to do an audit on whatever voting machines you guys use in your county. Let's see here. Somebody who has no screen name says, what will be the future of the big, beautiful bill? It will fail if people put political pressure on their elected representatives to make it fail, but if not, it could potentially pass. Christy Jonas says, I mean, they shooting journalists. Yeah, you know, the police, ICE, the National Guard, you know, they're not there to settle things, you know. Sometimes those people like shoot protesters and reporters and shit. Philosophical Peacock says, also Black Flag actions undercover government actors pretending to be protesters, potentially. Philosophical Peacock. But yeah, I don't really see any evidence of that happening, but potential. GeoMile61 says, if people loathe the Constitution, trigger Trump to declare martial law before he plans. I'm not really sure what you're getting at there, GeoMiles. See if you can rephrase. SMG3 says, why does MAGA believe everything Trump says? Because that is the information that they are that is the information environment that they are stuck in. They are stuck in an information bubble, and that is what the information is telling them. Giovanni Bracha says, bro, why does the United States cater to Israel? Why do they do that? So there are different motivations within the two political parties why politicians would kowtow to Israel. There's a lot of money behind Israel, so they could potentially hurt your chances of re-election if you go against them. There are a lot of Republicans that believe that if Israel takes over all of the Middle East, that it will summon the rapture to happen, which is psychotic that we have Christian nationalists that are Christian extremists that are in charge of our government. And also, I'm sure there are Democrats who are worried that any criticism of Israel would be looked at as anti-Semitic and would potentially hurt the Democrats' coalition, their Rainbow Coalition, of which Jewish people are a part. Let's see here. GeoMiles says, disrupt their plans to declare martial law by triggering it early if good idea. I don't think it's a good idea. Jamie says, when do you think the Russia war is going to end? Probably not until Vladimir Putin is either out of power or dead, because he does not seem to be incentivized to make it end at any point. Lauren says, did you go to the protests? I didn't, but I will be going on Saturday. Let's see here. Jamie says, a person in power sending a certain race to concentration camps. Does no one see the resemblance? Lots of people see the resemblance, Jamie. Let's see here. Mr. Lean, let's see here. Over on TikTok. It would require more cooperation, both within the parties and between each other. I may even make them able to function better. That's Fiery Boy talking about his 1 month House Speaker mandates. You know, we have seen the Republican Party not have a Speaker of the House because they have been busy fighting amongst themselves around who is going to be the person, as opposed to working with Democrats to elect somebody reasonable. They have opted instead to just not have a Speaker for large swaths of time. So, yeah, I don't really have faith that would force the parties to work together. The Republican Party has no interest in working with the Democratic Party. They just believe in, we have power and you don't, so fuck off. Binsky says, why ask you? Because I know a lot. No Name says, what's your opinion on Israel and Palestine? I am for the citizens and I am against the governing bodies of both of those countries. Let's see here. The government often does this where they pigeonhole families into certain styles of living, which can be extremely limiting and punishing to people who do not follow the government approved archetypes, such as when welfare eligibility rules in the USA discourage 2-parent households or subsidizing traditional marriage roles. How would you deal with this? Asked Mr. Lane. So I'm not 100% sure. It sounds complicated. It sounds like there's a lot of nuance around this issue. My one top line suggestion would be universal basic income. If people are forced to live a certain way because that's the only way they can get their government assistance, then they will be incentivized to keep that style of life. You know, they might be worried that if they get a job that they would be making less than they would be making off of government assistance not working, and similarly, like people might get divorced because they can't afford the cancer treatments that they need. And so if we universalize healthcare and universalize basic income, then potentially we would be removing that structure that people might need to fit themselves into. But yeah, I don't know, it sounds really complicated to me. Boomer Kathy says, why are protesters out now instead of waiting till No Kings next weekend? There's no wrong. You can't do too much protesting in an administration like this. Completely Lawless says, in terms of priority, where do you put the deficit? It used to be at the very bottom of my list, but it's getting so large that the interest rates are so high that it is becoming more of a priority. But yeah, yeah, it's an ish. It's definitely an ish. Fogor Productions, good to see you, my man. No Name says, if the Democrats win the midterms, how massive is this going to be? Massive. It's going to be massive. All right, everybody, we are at a little over an hour, so I just want to say thank you for everybody for being here and asking questions. Thank you for all the gifts, for all the likes, for all the shares. I appreciate all the support that you can give me. If you want to send money, you can. I've got a Patreon. I got a store that you can buy things from. You can find those on my website. You can also send gifts on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube and subscribe and all that good stuff. All that stuff helps, but you don't have to do it if you don't want to. I know that we're all suffering through a cost of living crisis. If you have any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, my DMs are open, and also you can email me through my website. That's the best way to get in touch with me. Sometimes I don't see the TikTok messages right away. My regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Yeah, that is, and my schedule you can find on my website, and you can also find my live stand-up schedule on my website. I don't have any dates right now because I just got off of 3 really long tours, and so I'm taking a little bit of a break. But keep your eyes peeled if you want to come see me do stand-up in person. And lastly, just please, my heartfelt plea for y'all to do the work. Just please do the work. Go to my Discord, check out what the work is, pick some shit off that list, and do it. If we all do the work, then nobody has to do a lot of work. The work is the only way that we get out of this. Social media is not going to save us. The judiciary is not going to save us. The Republican Party is not going to save us. The Democratic Party wants to save us, but they don't have enough money or political power to actually save us. The Republican Party has access to unlimited dark money funds. And with that, they can affect enough of political discourse that people just don't vote, or they vote for Republicans. We cannot fight on this field. We have to do it in person. And we all have to do the work, guys. Let's all do the work. The one advantage that we have is that there's a lot more of us than there are of them. So let's do the work, guys. All right. Any final questions to get to? Completely Lawless says, do you see Dems winning more than House in the midterms? At the moment, polling says no on the House, and the Senate is unlikely. But if people do the work, we can make the impossible possible. We can take every seat. Democrats could take every seat if people do the work. But when pollsters say that is a statistical impossibility, what they mean is they don't think people are going to do that amount of work. They don't think that many people will do that much work. Lauren says, should I go to Pennsylvania on Saturday? I feel like Delaware is going to be less effective and smaller. I think, I don't know 100%. I would maybe talk to a protest organizer about that. But my feeling is that the reason why we're spreading these protests out, as opposed to just going to D.C., is so that more people can participate. And so I would just say go to wherever is closest. If you want to go to Pennsylvania, go to Pennsylvania, But yeah, that's where my mom lives. Go say hi to my mom. Let's see here. If Trump hates California so much, can he give us a way to Canada? No. I don't think he is gonna. Lagunish says, how do you separate right-wing misinformation from devout Christian values? That's a really good question, Lagunish. Really sounds, it's difficult, because that is part of the right-wing agenda, is to say that you cannot be an American unless you are a Christian, and you cannot be a Christian unless you are a Republican. So it's difficult, I guess I would just try to figure out what each person is, what their values are, like if you are somebody who is deeply in the sauce of the Protestant work ethic, and if you're rich, it means that God loves you and shit like that, then yeah, I don't really see how you can separate that from the ideology of the Republican Party being that rich people are just better than us and don't have to abide by the laws and get to steal all of our money. And, you know, everybody else gets to be a fucking serf, you know, and they get to die of cancer from all the runoff from all the billionaires' chemical factories. But yeah, you know, if you are somebody who believes in the teachings of Christ and, you know, healing the sick, feeding the hungry, clothing the poor, you know, housing the unhoused, you know, those are firmly democratic values. So, but, you know, maybe those people can be swayed by just appealing to their charitable natures, you know. Let's see here. Completely Lawless says, would you impeach Trump to have Vance as president? Yeah, Vance would be a massive piece of shit and he would be terrible, but it would take a significant amount of political power away from the Republican Party if Trump didn't exist anymore. Because nobody in the Republican Party has the same kind of value that he has to the base. Lauren says, do you think these protests will be met with force? Probably not every single one. I think that the number of protests where that will be met with force are going to be few and far between. That's another advantage to having it in so many different cities at the same time. For example, like where I'm going to be going to the protest is in, you know, Los Angeles is probably not going to have any, you know, clashes with the National Guard or anything like that. But, you know, if you are the kind of person that's like, you know, I'm going to have a shield and I'm going to make sure that I can douse every tear gas canister and stuff like that. Like there are different places that you can go to. But yeah, you know, it is a concern. It is a concern, and I don't fault anybody for being worried about that. Let's see here. All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm going to head out of here. Catch me tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad channel. Hit me up. Do the work. Do your self-care. Have hope. Tell the billionaires to fuck your butthole in the bad way, like as an insult, not as like a good thing, because people sometimes that's nice. I don't know, for some people. And otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. 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 Goodbye.